Good evening, everyone. I call the November 13th, 2023 school board meeting to order. It is 6:03 p.m. We're in room conference room C of the Fisher Administration Building at 12121 West North Avenue. Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris. Dr. Hoyt. Yes. Ms. Willis. Here. Dr. Worley. Here. Here. Mr. Meyer.
Absent?
Dr. Jessup.
Here. We do have quorum this evening, and Mr. Morris and Mr. Meyer are not able to join. We will begin with allotted 30 minutes for public comment. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider the input and decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issues raised. However, it is not the intent of public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into a debate with a member or members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items this evening. Dr. Boyd, can you time the full 30 minutes and I will time each 3-minute increment?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any public comment in the room this evening? Please.
Here.
Yes.
Hello? You can hear me. Okay. I'm Janine Cameron. I live in Wauwatosa, in fact, just a few blocks away. And I'm petitioning tonight for some handicapped spots put by Bretlow Field where the two baseball diamonds come together. It would be right off of Gilbert, past 119th. And I think both Wauwatosa East and West use those. And I was at my grandson's games throughout the spring season, and the last one was July. And of course, I got a ticket. But it was for parking in the street, and I did not. I have pictures. I parked on the slab on the park itself. And so I decided to contest, and I contacted some aldermen, and Joe Phillips said that this has been an ongoing problem and that his own parents could not come to their grandchildren's games because there were no handicap spots available. So I went to court, and the judge read it, everything, and looked. I have pictures also as to where I parked and then how far away the Fisher building parking lots are. And she said, okay, this is ridiculous. This is a waste of taxpayers' money, my time, your time, and this is going to get thrown out. In fact, I'm shredding this. You don't owe us a penny because you did not park on the street. I said, I know. And so she said that she just hoped that I could pursue this and come here and talk to you. And so I quote her correctly. She said, we in Wauwatosa would like to be welcoming to all. So I am here and petitioning. I know that if it even gets looked at, that quotes would have to be brought in and it would have to go onto some budget. And last month's budget, I didn't want to, you had so many important things to do. So I waited. So I don't know if this is going to be too late or not, but I sure would like to see my grandson's games. So that's it. I know I'm under 3 minutes. Yay. Any questions? Or I have, like I said, I have pictures.
I'll take your information.
Okay, she took some information, but.
Yes. Thank you very much. Alderman Phillips and I have spoken before, and I know I've spoken with Dr. Means about this item. And for the board, I know this is something that the district team has been looking at. What this is referencing is there are handicap spots in the parking lot. They are not anywhere close to where the actual fields are where you'd be trying to get to. So I think it's a really, I appreciate the commenter bringing this up. And would ask that the district take a look at this and explore what might be possible. Any additional public comment in the room this evening? Seeing no public comment in the room, anything else online tonight, Jeremy?
I am seeing no hands raised.
Thank you very much. We will move on to our consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action? Seeing none, Jenny, can you read this one out?
It is recommended that the school board approve the consent agenda, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Wills. Any board discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Dr. Morris, Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer, Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes, the consent agenda passes. We're next up to strategic goal 1, academic performance. The first is a state report card overview and how it fits into the overall academic picture. I know the board had a flipped presentation on this, and it looks like we have some of our team here to share a bit more this evening. Thank you both for being here. If you can start out with introductions for the community.
Absolutely. Good evening, Nicole Marble, Chief Academic Officer, and I have Ms. Lindsay White here, our Director of Data Quality and Analytics. So as you alluded to, Dr. Jessup Banger, there was a flip presentation shared with school board and the community around just an overview of the school report cards, which will be deployed tomorrow. They are currently embargoed by the Department of Public Instruction, and each school is prepared to share out some highlights and some areas for continued growth and work at each individual school. We also have a district-wide communication that'll be going out from a more holistic perspective, both in terms of areas of successes and areas that we want to continue to strive for improvements as a whole entire district. I will turn it over to Ms. White here momentarily, but just wanted to reiterate with our school board and our community that what comes out with the school report card is another way of the state just rebranding information that we are already looking at and have been aware of. Kind of going in and out, I apologize. The data that is on your desktops this evening, community members can have access to it in the room here as well, is all information that you have already received. We presented to the school board back in March, just in terms of overall where we have landed with our the state's accountability assessment with the forward exam, pre-ACT, ACT back in August. That's not new information. We also had in front of you, we have some STAR data, which is our which is one of our screeners that we have for reading and math in the district. That information was presented back at the board retreat that you had in October. And then the other piece is the forward information. So two different forward data points. And then the other document that you have in front of you are just some of the key takeaways for our community members that are viewing this. There was something similar sent out to the community as well, I believe in October, just in terms of some of our theories of our potential theories as they relate to why we saw different patterns and trends in terms of growth in our forward exam results from this past year. I'll turn it over to Ms. White to just give a quick little high-level overview of the state report card, and then we'll take any questions that you might have.
Good evening. As you guys saw, maybe in the flip presentation, there's kind of three main points. As Dr. Marble said, this is information that we're monitoring on a regular basis already within the school district. It is representative of 3 years of data. So it's looking at forward from the past 3 years, which is new this year because of COVID. This is the first year we have 3 consecutive years of information. And then to be noted is the attendance information comes back from the 21-22 school year. So when we're looking at attendance rates on there, it's not referencing last school year. It's actually 2 years before. December because DPI is still collecting our last, what they call a snapshot of information this December. So as we put a lot of efforts in place around attendance and different processes and practices, those won't show up for a year or two after we have fully implemented it based off that lagging data. The priority weights, as I mentioned in the presentation, are based off the social economic status of each building or the district as a whole. So something just to note, majority of our buildings, all but one, have a higher percent of achievement in the report card than the area of growth. So when we're looking at growth and achievement, they start as equal at 25%. And then if you hit a certain percent of social economic, your percent of growth is higher than your achievement and your weighting. We only have one school representing that has a higher growth percent than achievement. So overall, we should be looking at our district of what achievement we're seeing in all of our buildings for the most, the biggest area of support in the progress around the achievement area. As Dr. Marble said, they're tied back to our milestones. So as we reported out the August board meeting where we were on our milestones, we linked in the data that we updated from August. And then last but not least, this are also included on the governance board that we created for the school board that is being updated currently with Q1 information and should be made to the public by the beginning of December on the website as well. So we're finalizing that update with Q1 of this year compared to Q1 of last year for any data that we have access to. So our goal is to get that cleaned up and then have it ready for the board to review and then have it on the public website by the beginning of December for the whole community to see. And then last but not least, just bringing us back to some of our strategic plan goals, the monitoring and metrics of our different strategic plans and creating of an external dashboard is how we can really tune into what's captured in the state report card. So not just waiting for the state to report it to us, but how are we monitoring on a regular basis, such as attendance rates on a daily basis, which we're doing right now, forward dives into data of disproportionality, and then also looking at our STAR data and some other data points across the buildings to really monitor how we're doing and not just wait for that one snapshot from DPI coming tomorrow, November 14th.
Saying all this just to reiterate the fact that what will be deployed tomorrow is not of shock to any of us. It is something that we were able to more or less predict based on the data that we've been monitoring along the way, and that you all have had access to along the way. So nothing should come out of left field, so to speak, in terms of how our schools are performing on the school report card. And then just want to reiterate the fact that the school report card is 3 years. So it's not just incumbent on last year's performance. It is 3 years. It's very similar to our financing budgets that those are on a 3-year rolling average. So just want to highlight that. And with that, we will take any questions that you might have.
Dr. Hoyt.
I'm just going to start with a really basic question, and then I'll have some other ones perhaps as we go along. But if it's a 3-year, if it's representative of 3 years, then how much growth, how much change in our report card would one really be able to expect, given that it's not going to be reflective of, it's not just a year by year, which I think means the shifting of scores over time is going to be slower.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's hard to name an exact number.
Yeah.
One of the things DPI does not provide us with is what percent each year represents. So they don't say that they're equivalent across all 3 years. So it's 33, 33, 33. They're saying that it is the 3 years with more weight given to the last year, but they don't say specifically whether that's a high weight. So the main thing is it's representative of 3 years of data, and DP doesn't give us the exact percent. So I can't tell you whether it's we jump next year and we make movement, or if it's just over year around it. One of the things we have dug into is just looking at different demographic groups of specific moving from below basic to basic, and then how many move from basic to proficient. So kind of keeping an eye on those numbers the next couple of years will be helpful for us in figuring out what that movement or what we can expect or what we want to see. I also think as our buildings continue their school growth plan journey and the next iteration, really looking at what growth they've made in the last 2 years and then setting those goals based off what they've learned about their own individual buildings and areas of focus will be kind of guiding number as far as how much growth we can see.
So as a result of that guesswork that the State Department has kind of put us in, that's why us looking more at the internal data that we have, whether it be STAR data, the forward data, is much more comprehensive and meaningful to us than waiting for the school report card to come out. Because we can't make as many predictions as we can with some of the internal data that we're monitoring.
If you had a community member ask you, what should they specifically be looking at? If we have we have a lot of data. Where would you direct a community member to look? Is it at their specific school growth plan? Is it at forward data at their school? What would you suggest they do?
Absolutely direct them to their individual school's growth plan. At the local level is where we will see the most change the quickest. So they will also be able to connect with classroom teachers to find out how classroom teachers are working in service of that school, the school's goals, the building principal. They will all be able to give tangible examples of how the work is being carried out in their specific building on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I see that. So to your point, Dr. Marble, those are also, the work that the schools are doing in their school growth plan are directly correlated to what's in the school growth plan. So they should be able to speak directly to what they're monitoring in an effort to see how they're doing and how they're progressing throughout the year.
Question just to piggyback off that. Will parents have access eventually to this dashboard to see those school growth plans as well? Like the same information that we have, is that in December that they'll get that information?
Yeah, the goal is to get the live website on the DPI or the district website by the beginning of December. So our goal was just to get it updated with new information. Then I have a meeting with Sarah Ellis to get it linked to our school website or district website so that the community can see it.
I'll just add to that each individual school should have sent out a quarterly update to their school community of where they are at with their school growth plan. So if the community member is tethered to a school, they will be able to see it that way. And then come December, a community member who's not tethered to a school will be able to see it publicly as well.
Can you kind of just to bring this all in? How are the PACE Wednesdays? How are the school growth plans? How is this data all being used to, because if you look at some of the areas, I mean, there's a big discrepancy in social studies among some of our elementary schools. Can you just talk about how certain items are being targeted with all of those areas?
Card, if that's what we're talking about. The school report card only takes into consideration ELA and math. And then when we're looking at ELA and math, it's really at specific grade levels. So third grade ELA and eighth grade math are really the areas in which those data pieces are extracted into the school report card. As for social studies, we are currently in a social studies audit process, as we know that we are being assessed on standards that we are not necessarily teaching quite yet. And so we know that that's an area for us to dig into.
I guess I was more talking about the data on the dashboard that parents are going to be able to see in December, right? Some of it seems a little alarming. Like when I look at Jefferson, for instance, and see that they went down, 10% or 14% respectively in social studies and science. How can parents know that that school's addressing it? Not just in their school growth plan, but the PACE Wednesdays, that it's all being taken into consideration.
So that's all tied into the school growth plan. And that would be the conversation with the teachers, building principals on how they are leveraging early release time, how they are leveraging the common planning time or the PACE time during the school day so that teachers are utilizing data at the local level. Because that's really, again, what is going to make the quickest change for learners. It also takes into account whether or not our teachers are heeding feedback from building principals and from instructional coaches as they are giving feedback on practice to continue to move the work forward.
And just to highlight one more point that you made, that, in these areas, especially of social studies and science, which we don't see on the state report card, but we do see in our own data that we didn't have a curriculum that aligned with standards, right? So everybody kind of was doing their own thing in elementary schools, right? That's why some elementary schools were performing better than others.
Absolutely.
That we're working towards that consistency through our audits and through the recommendations that we make from those audits.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
So last year, I think a lot of the focus of the board. I think that we've grown a lot in that area based on some of the data we've seen this year. So I think what that tells me or shows me and should show the community is when the board and the district are sort of really honed in on making improvements in a specific area, that we really can do great things. So my hope is that, and I think my fellow board members would agree, is that we really see huge growth in the academic areas this year. So to that end, is there anything that your department or division needs from the board or from the district that you think you don't have? And that you don't have to answer that now, but if you think of anything, I think that would be really important to communicate to us because I mean, academics is like why we are here, right? So my expectation is that we see huge growth in academics this year. I think we've prepared the buildings. I think we have great people at the district level. So my expectation is we see huge growth just like we did in behavior last year and disciplinary things. So that's my first point. Second point is we talk a lot about our traditional schools. The Montessori school really had a lot of pretty significant drops in growth. I know that they kind of had leadership change last year. What is being done at the district level to help them? And do they need additional resources?
Sure. So Montessori is a unique entity in that we have a highly qualified leader in that building who is Montessori certified, is a nationally board recognized educator in the Montessori world, and does train Montessori teachers as a result of her work. And so being able to bring somebody of that caliber into this space who knows and speaks Montessori is going to help that building move mountains. They have not grabbed onto the traditional district level resources for a reason. It's because they believe in the Montessori values and virtues and the curriculum that Montessori has in place. And there are very beautifully aligned lessons at standards that Montessori has. And so we have empowered Ms. Palin to work with her educators around the work that Montessori has put out aligned to standards. And I will say that that is a bright spot in our district that is really leveraging what we would call actual continuous improvement efforts. So we talk about utilizing the common planning time and utilizing early release Wednesdays for professional learning. That building is doing an exceptional job of really doing PDSA cycles. So plan, do, study, act, adjust based on the data that they are gathering. So they are headed in a great trajectory.
Is there a Montessori coach?
There's not a specific Montessori coach. Ms. Palin is the serves as the Montessori coach. We do have math coaches and ELA coaches on consult, so that they can either come in and work with a particular teacher or work with Ms. Palin to be able to move things forward. We simply do not have enough instructional coaches to be able to assign somebody over there full time, given the needs at our other buildings, nor does Montessori follow the same curriculum. And so we've had to make some tough decisions in that arena.
So back to the data. In terms, I don't know how it's working. I'll just talk loudly.
Here we go.
In terms of visualization, I liked how you had a little bit of growth one color and a lot of growth another color. I kind of wonder about doing that. Like, is there a percentage of loss that is like more important and less important? I mean, because there must be some fluctuations year to year. And when you're only looking at 2 years of data, it's hard for one to think about, is this just typical fluctuation in a school, or is this fluctuation where we need to apply resources and really look? So that might be something to help. Also, a lot of red might make someone panic, but a 0.4 red feels very different from a 9.3 red or something like that. So I would just suggest, if it's not too complicated. I guess the other thing that I wonder eventually, or maybe I'm just not reading it to see it, is that some of the schools, this is contextual, not thinking about like an excuse or a reason, but some of the schools are carrying a somewhat heavier load of students with supports and special needs, and that I don't know how much that is something that we can see in the data as well, just so we kind of understand that when a school with that grows, or changes or gets closer to achievement, that is a huge jump forward if they're carrying a large. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but to me, it sort of feels like that should be something that we're paying attention to, because then that's reflecting that our district is doing a good job at providing the supports to students who may not show up as well on standardized testing, because that's often a place that for some kids who have various different learning challenges, that's where standardized testing doesn't serve them as well as some of the other ways of measuring their knowledge base.
And that's why so thank you for elevating that and for the recommendation. And that's why we do look at data disaggregated internally, and we look at all sorts of different data, whether it be common assessments at the school level, or the STAR data that's disaggregated. So just want all of you to know and the community to know that this is not the only data that we look at. This is very high level information for all of you as you're governing the work.
Yeah, and I bring that up because sometimes a lot of people are looking at data like this to try to decide which part of Wauwatosa do I want to buy a house in, right? And I want people to realize that there are some schools that might have really strong in one area or another area, and that that we aren't just looking at academics, absolutely important, but academics is pushed ahead also by having good staff supports and strong curriculum, and teachers having those supports that they need, and those figuring out how to reach children. So if you want to choose a school because your child needs a particular kind of support or curriculum, that feels like that should also be in somewhere that people can find it and understand what that means. So no, thanks for eliciting that. That's really helpful to know that you all are looking at that. We just have to figure out how to help people understand that when they just look at a number like what comes out tomorrow, it might say, well, this school is, at this rating. But what we know as a district is that school has high levels of this or high levels of that, or has really progressed in this particular way. And that it's not just about the numbers that come out.
I think that's what we can grow into as we continue to help our schools tell their stories.
I wanted to ask about pulling out the data for the STEM programs within the middle schools and even Sherwood, right? I mean, I would like to start to begin that conversation too. I think it's important, as a district that we have, unique and dynamic offerings, but I also want to make sure that they're appropriate and successful programs, right? And when I see a dip in certain things like Montessori, I understand, there hasn't been a strong Montessori leader and it wasn't necessarily traditional Montessori. So we're moving there, but I also see a dip in WSTEM. And, so I want to make sure that we're not only looking at the schools, but the programs that are offered within the schools to make sure that they're achieving the same way that we expect all of our students to achieve.
And I just want to remind the board that we are currently doing a STEM audit. So we are partnering with an individual who is doing a comprehensive look at our programming. So we will have some of that information for you in the springtime.
I mean, but if you think it's important to pull that data out, I mean, I know as a board member, I would certainly like to see how some of those students are comparing, to the students in the traditional schools.
Yeah.
I think Ms. Willis asked about Pace Wednesdays, how we're utilizing those. The school growth plans we've talked about. I think the one thing we didn't mention that I wanted to ask about are those walkthroughs by the principals and those instructional look-fors. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's going so far this year?
Yeah, we started out really strong, really focusing in on the classroom environment that I presented on a couple of weeks ago, giving really targeted feedback as to what was going well and areas in which our educators could continue to support learners in the classroom. That continues. We've folded in the other instructional levers, and as we would expect, we have seen a slight, well, not a slight, we have seen a decline in our building principals being able to conduct those classroom walkthroughs because of other things that started to happen during the school year, whether it be needing to attend additional IEP meetings or needing to have different behavioral supports. So it is still happening, just not with the greatest amount of as we would like to see. That is also coupled, however, with our principals now doing formal and informal observations. And so we are that on a weekly basis, as well as to what percentage of formal and informal observations our building principals are engaging in. And as we see that go up, do we see walkthroughs go down? Or if we see a decline, are we seeing behaviors in the schools go up? So we are triangulating that data to create a story from a systems perspective as to what's going on, but then also having regular conversations with our building principals about what are the barriers for you being able to get into spaces and how do we work to help remove some of those barriers. So overall, they are working diligently to elevate strong practices with our teachers and then also provide reflective questions or pointed areas for improvements as they're getting into spaces.
Yeah, on an ongoing basis would really like to know how that's going. We have, particularly at the secondary school level, given additional resources like deans of students. We're seeing behavioral behavioral issues decline. And so to me, it seems like we've given resources, they're working. And then the question becomes like, why are principals not getting into the classrooms and doing the instructional look-fors that we've kind of like given all these resources to have happen? And when we've talked about this in the past, I think it was Ms. Foch who came and was talking a lot about it, but it seems like it's like these instructional look-fors are the linchpin to make sure that things are happening, that start here in the boardroom and move all the way through to the student level. Mm-hmm. And so if that's not happening, if we're missing something, we're not seeing that chain through to the end. And therefore, is that part of why we aren't seeing changes in our academic achievement that we want to see, or as rapidly as we want to see them?
Mm-hmm. I think that there are also a lot of practices that are being challenged that have maybe become cemented in an individual or a group of individuals' practices. And so just trying to untangle some of those pieces you pull one thread and then 900 other threads come down. And so it's really trying to find bite-sized pieces of getting individuals to take one small step forward in terms of shifting practice that we know is what we are looking for in our classrooms with our students. So it's bite-sized improvements are what we need to see in order to see big giant shifts. So I keep reiterating the need to be in classrooms, as I know my fellow district leaders are, and our building principals know that they need to be in classrooms giving feedback to teachers. And I will say, the first thing that they'll say is, I know I need to do more. I know I need to do more, and I want to do more. It's not for lack of will. It is them needing to make sure that they're prioritizing that work.
As a follow-up on that, you have a principal or two that are doing that, who then finding out how they're making that work.
Absolutely.
Be shared with all the principals.
Yep. And part of that is some work that we will be doing we have our principals in a meeting on Thursday this week. And so part of that is showing some different highlights of how some of our building principals have been able to couple the walkthroughs along with observations, and being able to highlight that for our for the rest of their colleagues. Some individuals have talked about how the walkthroughs have been a little bit cumbersome because they're also trying to incorporate that with something else. And so I had a kind of a breakthrough with a colleague today in terms of this is really what we're monitoring from a district's perspective. Whatever else you want to do, have at it. Make it work for you. And so when we talk about the change continuum, we're really in an exploring phase of what can we do to then move ourselves to this is just what's expected in our like 3 to 5 year plan of things. So it's really kind of doing some of our own PDSA cycles or plan, do, study, act, adjust cycles from a systems perspective so that we can make some more solid, no, this is what needs to be done moving forward.
Got a controversial question. Do we monitor this at the classroom level?
Say that again. What do you mean?
Do we know our data at the classroom level of which teachers are showing success and which teachers are not showing success? And I know there's variables, but we know great teachers have great outcomes. Parents want great teachers in every classroom. We want great teachers in every classroom. And every teacher presumably wants to be great. Do we have data and are we deploying resources to teachers that we see are struggling to make sure that they have the resources they need and in places where they may not be able to be successful, they're pursuing other opportunities?
The short answer is yes. We can and we do get down to the classroom level in terms of data, and we have shifted resources in particular buildings to better support educators that are not demonstrating the most basic level of expectations in the instructional expectations in the classroom. Also, where we are not the desire that we would want to see in our students. And so I've been working, our director of instruction, we've been working with building principals to problem solve how different supports could look a little bit different and not just what we've said, this is going to be this, because we're seeing a high percentage of failures in a particular class with a particular teacher, where we are seeing that the very needs of is so diverse that work with their team, for example, is not going to be as impactful as that particular teacher just with an instructional coach one-on-one to make sure that the different needs and plans, just so to speak. So short answer, yes, we can and are looking at the classroom level.
And I think the thing I wonder about is I want to make sure our teachers are really supported. And I want to make sure every kid has a great teacher and that every teacher is working on being the very best version of the educator they can be. And that I think one of the things I worry about is that when we get stuck in habits that may not be good, that we aren't changing in ways that will make our teaching and learning more effective. Because ultimately, we want to be a place where great teachers are here. And we want to be a place where great teachers have the support to do excellent work from parents, that the kids are working diligently and really hard. But we also only have so much of a time to have an impact on a kid. And I don't want any kid to be in a classroom with a teacher who's not delivering excellent teaching. And so I want to make sure that they have the energy, the capacity, and the supports they need, and also their own internal drive to make sure that they are taking that feedback, seeking it out, and desiring to be the very best educator in every classroom we can for kids. I'm fascinated by this data. We are highly variable, and this is not something as a board member I'm surprised by. I think in TOSA, what we have seen is we've had variability one of my colleagues had shared this already, we haven't had a continuous curriculum across all schools that was being taught exactly the same. Our pedagogies have been disparate. And And so I know we are tightening those things up. None of that would show up in the data yet. That was groundwork that was laid last year is being laid this year and next year. And so while this time around, I'm not expecting massive increases in all places immediately. I am expecting to kind of see continuous ongoing growth. I know we've also have a couple classrooms have like 11-to-1 teacher to student ratio. And I said to Dr. Means, I'm really like 11-to-1. I'm expecting those classrooms to, and honestly, I would love to see that data because I think I would love to know what our sweet spot is. I would say as a board, we will probably not give the green light to go 11-to-1 in any classroom next year. That would surprise me. But we know that there's this balancing act between budget and between small class sizes. What is that level of, is it 22-to-1, 26-to-1, 28-to-1, where we can maximize the impacts that we have. Some classrooms will have different unique challenges, some students and their learning needs. And making sure that the teachers both have the resources. But if we were to figure out what our sweet spot is, that would be helpful to know with the student. We've got national data that we can look at for research. But what does our local data tell us too? And how do you kind of parse that out of what is that sweet spot? And for schools that have greater needs, it may be a lower teacher to student ratio than schools that are already performing really well. And that's okay. Let's give the students what they need and hold the expectation of let's all really do it. I'm also curious, like as a parent, I often think about, I have two kids, different types of learning, different areas of focus, different ages. And I'm always trying to balance wanting them to do really well, probably as an annoying dad too much, and also not creating a pressure cooker for them, so that they are burned out, that they're feeling overwhelmed. We know students increasingly across the nation are struggling with mental health issues and anxiety. And I would love for one of the things that we can do for parents, for how can we make sure that parents are being prepared? You're talking about Montessori and the questions we had about Montessori. I was a Montessori parent through young ages with my kids, and I had no idea how to be a Montessori parent because it is a different style of learning. And I had to figure out what that was, how to support the learning at home. But I know there's a lot of work being done around how do we help parents and families be really good supports, be really engaged, making sure they're going to parent-teacher conferences, making sure that they're really engaging with the schools to be good partners. And I don't know if all parents know how to do that. And so how do we do that? How do we invite people in? How do we make sure our schools are open? My general sense in TOSA, that's done much better at the elementary level than it is at the middle school level, where your kid wants nothing to do with you anyway, and at the high school level. And so I think anything that we can do to balance those two things those were some initial thoughts that I had. Is I'm not surprised to see the dramatic variation. Some of the schools that we had challenges with last year did not perform as well as we'd like to see. I suspect as things have calmed and we've got leadership in different places that we'll see. My goal for this is that we both see growth across all the schools, but we'd see less variability from school to school. And I think that would be a really cool thing to see. I'm also fascinated. What is Wilson doing in science? I'd heard something that there was maybe a little bit more collaboration with WSTEM. I'm not sure, but that is a dramatic jump in that score. And if I just hone in on the ELA and the math, generally across the board, when I'm looking at the data from 21 to 22 to 23, almost all schools are increasing over that time period. So I don't know where the report cards will say, and I don't know how they calculate everything. And no matter how many times I've tried to backward map the data analytics on that, I can't figure it out. But it seems like our trajectory for math and ELA across nearly all schools over the last 3 years post-pandemic has been moving in the positive direction. The other thing I would say to the board, I keep reminding myself of this is the first time that we don't have pre-pandemic data mixed in with post-pandemic data. So I would see us start to continue to bump up. I want to reiterate Liz's question. What things do you need from the board? It could be resources. It could be, we need your leadership on these things. We need you to push us harder on these other things. We only have one employee, Dr. Means. and we are certainly pushing him to have really high academic standards and rigor. It was literally the singular reason why he was hired is to raise our academic outcomes and achievement, and why he is hired. It wasn't your musical preferences, that's for sure. And so he has hired a team to do that. And we have invested resources literally in everything that we've done to drive academic achievement. We have aspirations to be an outstanding academic district and to surpass anything Wauwatosa has ever historically been. What do you need from us to set that expectation, to make sure that we have the right staff at every seat, up and down in every single school, and that we have the supports that every staff member needs to feel like this is a place where I'm valued, I'm a professional, I've got high expectations of me, I've got high expectations of the kids, and I'm supported in doing this excellent work, and I can't imagine doing it anywhere else. What do you need from us? And not tonight, you don't have to have an answer, but any initial thoughts that you have?
I sincerely appreciate the question, asked a couple of times now, and the conversation that we've had here this evening. The expectation that we are moving forward with high academic achievement and high academic growth, and that push is paramount in us moving the work forward. So I'm requesting, humbly requesting that the school board continue to ask, how are we doing? What else do we need to be doing? Because quite frankly, if I may just be so candid, is we are pushing educators and we're making them uncomfortable in some spaces because we are asking them to change practice. That is hard. And so if you get questions from teachers and them saying certain things about things that they're being asked to do, they're being asked to do it because you have said, this is what we expect. So we need, our administrative staff needs to know that we have this body behind us to say, yep, you are being asked to do A, B, and C because we are demanding that we higher academic achievement for our students. And as long as we have that and you keep asking us what additional resources do we need, we're going to come before you in a couple of weeks with a new ELA curriculum that we feel is going to provide a more even playing field for not only our students, but also our teachers to have greater accessibility in how to differentiate instruction, for example. And I will leave it to my director of curriculum to explain in greater detail later on. But that is something that we need from a financial resource piece of things. I know that we talk a lot about instructional coaches and that some of our educators push back on instructional coaches, but they are pedagogical experts, and anything that they are bringing forward to teachers is not out of malice. It is out of trying to move teachers forward. I believe there's a famous quote by Michael Jordan about needing a coach until the day he retired. And so coaches are there not to make people's lives miserable, but to help move work forward. And sometimes, when I've worked with a coach in the past, like that's the last person that I want to talk to, but I think that person has his or her best interest in me growing as a professional or as an athlete. And so just continuing to lean into that and helping us maintain or even grow the number of instructional coaches that we have at the building level, because our principals, they can only do so much. And they are expected to have a bunch of different plates in the air. And yes, we have given them resources so they can be more of an instructional leader, but they also need a team at the building level to help move that work forward. So I guess those two things is continuing to bring academics as a forefront and reminding not only us, but the community of your expectations of us to move things forward and having our support as we do challenge some practices so that we can move forward. Because if we continue to do the same thing we've always done, we get the same results.
Yeah.
We need to be different. Mm-hmm.
So listening to you and even watching you speak tonight, it's clear that you have like these connections and this kind of map systems thinker, systems math in your head. I'm thinking about, some of the pushback that you had, and to what might that come from people not having that systems lens on this project, not knowing or not seeing the direct or indirect connections between like pace time and the academic achievement and the school report card. And I know it's hard to put it there, but I'm just wondering if there's a way eventually, not that you have more time, but to help people see those connections. Like we're spending this time on this week, and that builds into this, and that systems map view of how you are working so hard and they are working so hard to roll the district forward and the higher achievement.
I think it's just continued dialogue and continue explanation of always leading with the why. We're doing this because making sure that our building principals are equipped with the communication, making sure that our instructional leaders, whether it be our instructional coaches or our curriculum coordinators, have that why piece behind it. So, you know, we're continuing to grow as a system of not only continuous improvement, but of a system that puts academics first and foremost as a conversational piece. There are other things that people want to talk about first, and then academics is second, third, fourth, or fifth in line of what we actually want to talk about. So just making sure that we're holding tight to, no, this is what we're going to talk about first.
I only have one employee that I get to say this to, Dr. Means. I really want to see us that significantly exceeds. And I'm not expecting us to get there tomorrow when these come out, but the board needs you to keep pushing at this. And I know it's top of mind for you, but we are here to do this lift with you. And I suspect our teachers are wanting to be excellent in every way as educators as well. Thank you.
I think and sharing the why with staff, it's equally important to share the why with our community. I think a lot of times I hear, you know, our district administrative team has grown so much in the last 2 to 3 years. So I think it's important that parents and community members know that having those high quality subject experts in our buildings is going to make a huge difference. And if you don't come from education or like systems thinking, then maybe you just see that as an extra body, an extra staff person we're paying. So I think we need to do a better job of, and I've talked to Dr. Means about this a lot. We need to do a better job of sharing the why with our community. When we first started getting some pushback from staff about the shared learning time, I couldn't believe it because I was like, I wish when I was a teacher, I would have had that level of support at the building level. So I so appreciate all of the tools that you guys are using in our buildings, but definitely sharing that story, I think is hugely important, especially as we start making some really tough budgetary decisions. I would ask from the board perspective, that would help us when we're making these hard decisions, if the community knows and values those leaders in our buildings too.
And Ms. Hummerlin, I think the board really needs to explain to the community. We have asked and we've given the charge as a body of we need to really raise expectations and set really high expectations, and that takes human beings to do all the work that we're asking to be done. And if anybody would like to sit down and chat and walk through, I suspect board members would be happy to have coffee of it, be able to explain systematically, here's what we're doing, here's the work that's being done, is being done systematically. And we will see the fruits of that labor and continue to see the growth over time. But it is a big endeavor to come out of a pandemic, to bring a new team in place, to rebuild a lot of systems, to reimagine the curriculum, and to build all this as we go. And so I'm confident that we are headed in the right direction. And I'm excited for the community to see the impact. I want to hear from our students of any thoughts on, I don't know if you've ever, I suspect you have report cards that you make here, see some school growth plans and stuff, and it may go in one year and out the other, but as student board members, you've got a lot, and you will have more data on it. Any thoughts about the information that you got in front of you tonight, or any thoughts on things that you would like to advocate for?
Yeah, is there a trend you see, especially kind of at the high school level, where you see an increase in individuality with the students? Do you see like better student performance where they may identify having more hands-on relationship with teachers because their parents might not be more involved in their schoolwork? So, is there a trend you can find where students think that they perform better in hands-on classroom environments?
You articulate a little bit more what you mean by hands-on environments.
So, meaning they might have a more personal connection with the teacher.
I don't have granular data of that. What we can go on is the percentage of students that say that they feel comfortable at school. But I don't have granular data what you're expressing. So that would be something that we would need to dig into a little bit differently.
So with like all the data here, you talk about like STAR testing and as a junior, like ACT and everything. Do you have any like data from just the ACT scores over the year that you can show us? And also when I've seen this like STAR testings online, is there an option to do it on paper? Like also, I know that our school district is one of the only or what I've heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but that we take our ACT online and other schools like Brookfield or districts like Brookfield take them on paper. And myself, I feel like I do better on paper tests, which can vary throughout each student. But yeah, do you have any insight on that?
Wait, do you have any on that?
The ACT data is located on the website. I can pull it up here in a second to give any information. It'll also be on the governance board for everybody. From ACT, there is an ACT online option and there is a paper option. So I can bring that back to our assessment coordinator and the building principals to talk about what that could look like and what options that might be. But they definitely have both options, and it's by the school districts that opt in and out depending on kind of what decisions they've made as a school district. So I'll bring that back to our school principals and see what we can do around that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you want to just really quickly highlight ACT scores?
Yep.
Also, if they do a follow-up, a lot of times the modality is going to be in person. So I'm just thinking about the growth that we know with standardized testing, that when you take it the same way multiple times, it's going to improve over time.
Yeah. From an ACT's perspective, West East High School was at 22.4 last year, and West High School is at 19.7, and our WVA is at 17.0.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you use the ACT results as like a metric to measure scores by the school?
ACT is one of our district milestones. So we have 10 different district milestones for every different area in our children's education. So ACT is a milestone that we monitor not only the overall composite scores, but we also look at the subtests for every content area to monitor how students are doing there, and then how we look at, as Dr. Marble was mentioning earlier, grade information and other assessments within the school body to kind of triangulate data to really see how we can support students not only in the classroom, but also how they're performing on assessments like pre-ACT and ACT.
Thank you.
Any other final board comments or questions? So you started out, can you end where you began, which was what will be communicated over the next couple of days at the district level, at the school level? Parents have questions, thoughts, and so on, what steps they might take.
Sometime tomorrow, DPI will release out with all state report cards for the state of Wisconsin. At each of our buildings, our building principals have drafted a message for their families, giving them information regarding their dive into their state report cards, because they took a couple weeks to look at them since they've been embargoed within the school district. They will be sharing that with their families via some kind of communication mechanism, Blackboard, or email at the school level. And then our district will also be sending out a district-wide communication around district report card. So there'll be two communications that families could receive. From a district community standpoint, they could look at the DPI website tomorrow to see where we are, or the news releases that come out from the district regarding the district information. If people have questions regarding their state report cards, they can ask their school principals is the best way to start to begin with, to kind of dig into their talking points and kind of their ahas from their school report card. And then any questions that they might have, that would be a great place to start. So that'll come up sometime tomorrow. And yeah, anything else?
Thank you both very much. Next up on this item is a conversation about process and timeline for the creation of the 24-25 and 25-26 academic school calendars. I'll turn it over to Dr. Marble. Dr. Marble.
Yes. So, these are in board docs, right? Okay. So, what you see linked into board docs is a draft of the 24-25 school year calendar and the 25-26 school year calendar. So, just to bring to light where we've been and how these have developed thus far. There we have heated feedback from parents, from teachers, from building principals along the way in terms of what they would like to see out of a district calendar. And so what you have is a manifestation of all of that feedback brought together for the two different school years. Of note, it's a pretty straightforward calendar. Both of them are, with the exception of some additional professional learning days. In the past, we have had 4 days, up to 4 days for professional learning before the start of the school year. What our building principals and our teachers have communicated via surveys, via rounding that we do with building principals, where we go in and just find out how things are going. They have communicated pretty loudly that they need more time at the beginning of the school year to get prepared and launched into the year. So it is being proposed on both calendars that there are 6 days back before the start of the school year for educators to be fully prepared, 2 of which would be designated at the building level, 2 of which would be designated at the district level, and then 2 days of which would be reserved for for educators to prepare or plan in the way that they feel is necessary. So this feels to bring a more balanced approach to the request for more time at the beginning of the school years that have been requested of our stakeholders. The other note is that new educator onboarding has typically been a 4-day process. We've tried to make that be essentially 4 half days with work time. What we have gotten feedback on too is that some of the work that our new educators need to do is also work that the whole entire educational body needs to do. And so let's just be strategic in working to bring them all together. So we have moved it down from 4 days to 2 days. In terms of welcoming students back into the buildings, we have, for the 24-25 school year, we have September 3rd, in which we would maintain the model of having our 9th graders be at the building level in the morning and then welcoming back 10th through 12th in the afternoon. We would shift to having our 6th graders be just in the buildings by themselves, and then having 7th and 8th grade students come in the afternoon, rather than dismissing halfway through the day for our 6th graders as we did this last year. So that was a little bit of a loss of an instructional opportunity for our students or for community building. So being able to streamline that a little bit. We've gotten really positive feedback from staff and families around the time allocated for conferences in the fall and the springtime. So we'll maintain that structure for another couple of years, or at least proposing to maintain that for another couple of years, to see if we see any different trends. Throwing things out on one-offs doesn't always give us a full picture as to whether or not we are meeting the needs of families. But it seems to have opened up more opportunities for families to get access to conferences, at least with having the dedicated time. The format is maybe something that needs to be looked at each of the different levels. They've been empowered to structure that, but at least when we look at the calendar of time, we're looking to maintain that. I recognize that the professional learning days, especially in October and November of the 24-25 calendar, and then the professional learning days in September and October of the 25-26 calendar, maybe seem at first blush a little like that's peculiar, but there is great rationale behind those specific days. In particular, the October 3rd, 2024 is to observe Rosh Hashanah, one of the Jewish holidays. And then November 5th is an election day. So that is a presidential election day. Similarly to September 2025 and October 25, again, that is to have days allocated for the observance of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. And so that is why those days are maybe not on a traditional Monday or a Tuesday. Other than that, it should be noted that we have moved to have 190 days for teacher contracts, and that these calendars will also meet the instructional minutes that are required by the Department of Public Instruction.
I had a question around some of the days around the Jewish holidays. Did we have like absentee data to support that students were significantly missing those days? Like, why did we choose Jewish holidays over Ramadan, or maybe other holidays that students might miss because of religious observance? Like, do we have data to support that, like absentee data?
We don't. I think Ramadan is over a course of multiple days.
It is over multiple days. Yep.
I think it's almost a month.
Yeah, but there's a couple of days. There's a couple of days that are of particular, like high value of those who observe it.
I think the reason why we felt it was important to uplift the Jewish holidays is that they have been ignored. And I think you could make the argument that other days are not acknowledged, but it's a religion and a group of students who have had to navigate around the absence of those days being acknowledged in our calendar.
I guess what I'm asking, are there other groups of students who we should acknowledge, right? Because we do have a strong emphasis on Christian holidays. Like, do we need to take into account other?
Jessica, which ones are you? It would be, I think, more helpful for me if you were specifically advocating for specific dates that you're looking for.
We might want to ask the communities.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for specific dates.
Okay. I think the really big broad question that's a lot. Like,
if we had data to support those dates. Okay.
I think it could be helpful to have a better understanding of I don't know if that's a question to be asked our students. What is your religious background, or is that important to you? Because I do think we should be considerate if we're adding Jewish holidays. We should probably be considerate of other major religions. So I'm thinking Muslim would be like our Islamic religion would be like another sort of those being the most likely three: Christian, Muslim, Jewish, that we would see in our community.
Hindu.
I don't know. So maybe I don't know. I think that would be really helpful probably for us to know, so that if we're starting to allocate dates around religious holidays, we might want to be thoughtful on that.
I also would ask, is some of this driven by concern around, whether someone can achieve really good attendance? Or is this identity representation? Is the identity representation that I would want us to consider broadly? What's important to represent? There's also, I know where I work that the holiday coming up next week, we now call fall recess. And that's because we're real aware that for some of our students, that's not a holiday. It's trauma. And so I think it's like, that's a big conversation to have, and I'm all for having it. But I think we should do it, widely, and judiciously. The other thing, I guess the other thing to think about is, and I haven't read maybe carefully enough in the attendance policies, but if a student is absent for a religious holiday, there are districts or there are places where instead of counting that as an absence of any sort, it's just counted as it's taken off of their time in a different sort of way. So I guess it's a good conversation to open up. I think it would be good to thread that through this calendar setting if we want to open it for any group at all. And I'm really aware that our current holiday schedule is very preferential, as been pointed out, to Christian religious practices. And I think asking what diversity and inclusion we have in this district is important.
I would say yes, and I don't know if it's a either or. I think it can be a yes and. So I think the initial question of what about other religious observances and how we can best embed those observances in our calendars. I don't think that if you are considering this calendar and you'll be asked to vote on it on the 27th, that doesn't exclude us from continuing to reach out to other communities to find out what are the most important dates that could be acknowledged in this calendar or future calendars. That doesn't exclude us from having that conversation moving forward. I think it's a concept of being strategic and including as many observances as possible. I think the goal, so I wouldn't make it, this is an either or. I think this is the start of inviting other communities to have their observances, if it is an issue within a school calendar, to be recognized and observed within the school calendar. So I would say it's the start of, and it's a start that, as you've acknowledged as a board, is a long way coming, because right now it is a predominantly Christian, while we don't say it, it is predominantly Christian influence calendar. And if we are truly living out our principles around strategic goal number 2 of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, then this is a first step in what I would assume will continue to be engaging other communities and other stakeholders within our larger community. So I guess that would be, I know Ms. Willis isn't here, but I think that's what she was trying to say of, well, why this one?
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say is it's not an either or. I think it can be as many as possible, and we want to be as inclusive as possible. And so I would assume that this sets us now on a journey that maybe eventually we'll get to like your place of employment, where we're not calling it Thanksgiving break, but it's more of a mid-fall break, or it's I think we try to do a good job with some of our spring break time or our what we call winter break time. I think we're better than where we were 20, 30 years ago, but I think there's still a lot of room for growth. I guess what I would just say that while these are dates that are identified for observance of Jewish holidays, I hope that the community and the board sees this as the start of us being more attentive to other communities who may need to have their dates acknowledged in our school calendar as well. So I think that's really good feedback. I think that's really helpful, and we are open, and we believe this is a journey that we need to take, where other communities are able to engage us and we're able to observe those dates in our calendar as well.
I'm very happy to see the Strong Start day on here. I know when we started it last year, it was a little bit of a change from what was sort of proposed, that school would start, I think, the week before Labor Day, and for our 6th and 9th grade students. My question to you is that half day enough for sixth and ninth grade to give them a strong start?
I would be, I would like to have a deeper conversation. I feel like with our building leaders and their leadership teams. What's been communicated from at least the high schools is that it's been a good runway into bringing all of the learners into the high school. And when we had just a day for sixth graders last year, they decided to dismiss half day through. And so that was indication of half day seems to be sufficient. So
as a parent, that was frustrating.
Agreed.
It didn't work well. I do think, I mean, I had a sixth grader this year. I think it really helped with the nerves and the sense of community of like, we're all sixth graders coming into this building together. But I agree that I'm not sure that a half day, I'm not sure that we couldn't have benefited from a full day.
Yeah, I was also disappointed to see that it wasn't going to be a full day. It seems like there's plenty to cover. And then I also think about the 7th and 8th grade parents who are figuring out how to get them there at noon, because that's hard enough with high schoolers, but at least high schoolers have a little bit more independence on public transportation, walking and bicycling. It's just significantly more. So I don't think you just do it just to be convenience for the family,
Right.
but I do think that when I think about like getting to know several teachers and classmates, and that there are people who are joining our district for the first time in sixth grade, that seems to me like there should be plenty to fill a day for sixth graders.
If that's the directive of the board, we can do that. I just want to put it out there that may require us to re-examine instructional minutes at the middle school level in terms of having to add on time by not having our 7th and 8th graders come on that first day. So I just want to make sure that it is definitely something that we could say we're going to have just sixth graders in here, but then we're going to need to figure out how do we account for those instructional minutes.
How did we count this year?
It's a great question.
We would probably then want to look at if we want to do that for our freshmen too, right? That's another huge transition. So if we're thinking about it for our sixth graders, it seems to make, and if, I don't know, do they have the same instructional hours, middle school, high school?
Middle school and high school do, and we've taken great measures to bring high school up to what we need to be, where we need to be. And we are, we're holding on right by middle school. What's different with middle school in these calendar proposals, what we've had in the past is there's an additional there's more instructional time taken away in these calendars because of the additional professional learning days. So that's part of the reason why there's, why we're technically okay this year, but we wouldn't be moving forward.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that 9th grade is a little less because you're not integrating multiple elementary schools together. A much higher percentage of incoming 9th graders have been in the school district. I don't know that for sure, but I would guess that it's a little bit more of integration work because you're talking about multiple schools as well as new people coming in.
And I think middle school is your first time doing a locker combination and moving from class to class. It is a really big shift. I feel more strongly about having a sixth grade day than having a 9th grade day. I do think it's nice to have a little bit of time where our 9th graders can settle in and, find all their classes without it being the hallways being so busy. But I really feel like our sixth graders benefit from the opportunity to get to know each other and the changes that are coming to how they move through a day.
Are there any changes to beginning and end times for elementary, middle school, or high school for next year?
No, not at this time. It will be the same as this year.
Any other questions or comments?
So I actually reached out to like a lot of staff that I know personally, just because, I don't know, they have a way different perspective than I do. My husband and I have like a very flexible schedule, so I'm looking at this, we can make most of these work, you know? So I reached out to a lot of staff, and these were sort of themes of questions. Elementary staff, they don't have like technical record keeping days like the middle and high school teachers do. That was something that several requested. A lot requested that the professional learning days not be in the middle of the week, but I clarified to them that it was because of the new addition of the Jewish holiday recognition. I heard from a lot of high school staff that they didn't like the 3 days of conferences, that they would have rather had a full day, 8 to 4, instead of the 2, 4 to 8 days, and that it was just a long week or 2 weeks for them to come in with the kiddos after that. Also, chunking the professional development days at the beginning of the school year, that it'd be more helpful to have like the classroom times, self-directed time be together, like 2 days in a row versus having it separated. And having that at the end of the week so that they've already met with district and school leadership to kind of know the expectations for the year. And those were the general comments that I had. So
we can absolutely look at shifting the conference days at the high school level. I just want to caution that we will need to figure out ways in which to add more instructional time to the school day then. So because we will be taking away, and we will, if we look at February 26th, for example, that is a non-instructional day currently for middle school and high school elementary and middle school students. So that would be loss of instructional day at the high school. So we would need to change potentially the bell schedule yet again. So I just we can make all of this work. It's just what is going to be the directive of the board, knowing that we're going to have to add in minutes.
So we would be moving for kind of like the post. So like
right now the conferences, there's like 1 full day and then 2 half, then there's 2 days of evening conferences. I got feedback that was exhausting for our staff. So just, I understand like instructional hours because those are 8 hours.
That model was requested by the high school leadership last year, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Are we paying the teachers more? So you said we're 190 teacher hour or teacher days in the contract. Was that what it was last year? So we're adding all these professional development days, or
We were short days.
okay.
We did not, there's a board policy that literally outlines that we're supposed to have staff contracted to work between 190 and 192 days.
Okay.
We did not reach the 190 in this calendar. That's one thing. And then I do appreciate the feedback around the high school conferences. I've received some of that same feedback. And it's important to note that this is a structure that was suggested to us. So I want to go on record as saying to our high school staff, this is not a creation from the folks at Fisher. It was, we were taking direction from the leadership at the high school level. So we can definitely, we want to make sure that the conference model works best for the staff.
Right. So, and I would push back on that. I would want to make the conference model works best for families. That the staff are there to work with the families and get feedback, and that I want to ultimately make sure that the model is affecting the quality of the education for the student who is at the center of the educational endeavor.
Yeah, we should do both, but I think that we think about things how we can like make our staff happier and their experience better. I think aside from pay, I think considering their input on this calendar is hugely important too.
So I would love to let's do that, and let's check out when can we maximize, when are most parents and families available for conferences, and when are they most likely to come in. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say but reading I was trying to remember and then I looked to see the description below and the one that falls on the whole day, the actual conferences were only in the morning. So they had a full day, but was the afternoon then like their record time for high school? Was that how?
They were allowed to leave.
Okay.
So in the name.
Because I just want to say it wasn't
Thank you.
an evening followed by a full day. It was
No, ma'am.
evening followed by a half day.
And it was one of
Like held for the full day.
I'm so glad you raised that because it was one of those moments where we felt that we were doing something good for the staff. And so we shared with them when they were done with conferences at noon that day, they were allowed to leave and start a long weekend. And so
You want to repeat that for Liz?
So Liz, Dr. Worley appropriately pointed out that when we had conferences up until noon on the second day, from a district perspective, we shared with our staff that they could leave, they could go, that they did not have to remain on campus. And I think for high school staff, I think we went one step further.
I was just going to add,
Yes.
our high school leadership team came up with the structure for that half day on that Friday, that it was only going to be virtual conferences. And so our educators it was permissible for them to work from home on that day and have virtual meetings. So
we are meeting, we are doing as much as we can for staff. I mean, so for a high school staff member, they were able to leave and not come back to work half day on that second day. And they were allowed to work from home and conduct the conferences from home that day as well. Ms. Willis, I'm sorry that you were
I got locked out.
Yeah.
Back door's locked.
you didn't have to expose that. You didn't have to.
Community members were trying to get in.
No, it's okay. I wanted to say thank you for you raising up the issue. And what you missed was that what we shared was that it's not an either or. I think it can be a yes and for all, recognizing all of our different
I just want
stakeholder
to
groups.
data to support our decision. I mean, it's where I like to kind of ground my question.
I think, sometimes so I appreciate, I've said that we should ground our decisions greatly in data as much as possible. I think there's also opportunities for us to ground our decisions in our beliefs and in being as inclusive as possible. And so what the part that you didn't catch is that we do believe that there's opportunity for us to recognize as many other stakeholder groups as we need to. But in honor of strategic goal number 2, in being diverse and open to inclusivity, we want to make sure if there are needs and there are students and families who believe that they're not being recognized and seen in our school calendar, that we recognize those people.
Any other final comments or questions on the school calendars? There'll be an opportunity for parent and anyone who wants to give feedback over the course of the next week. That's one of the things we didn't do. So there's a process by which we develop these. What are our next steps?
Our next steps is that now you have had, I think, a very robust conversation around the school calendars, which I don't think we've done in the past. I think in the past, we've just kind of said, here's the calendars, we need you to vote. So now you have 2 weeks to deliberate around it. I think I want to thank Dr. Marble. She's done a really good job in accounting for all of our minutes, because as you know, it's not about the number of days anymore. It's about the number of minutes that we have. We've built in the 2 days for our high school. So if there's inclement weather days, we have that for high school. We account for the seniors being released early in this calendar. I think it's a very robust calendar. Candidly, I think one of the challenges that we've had over the last few years since I've been here is that we've opened up the feedback loop for the calendar to a lot of different stakeholders, almost too many. where it's difficult to get a sense of where we're trying to head. And that's why it's been reminded of me all year that we don't have the 190 days contractually that we're supposed to have in the name of trying to meet the needs of staff. That we, with calendars, sometimes is difficult to meet the needs of everyone. And I think a calendar is something that reflects your values as much as possible. It is also, and I think this is the point that I think Dr. Marble would tell me if I don't say it, she would remind me tomorrow. This is ultimately an academic tool. So I think often it gets conflated with how does it align with vacations? Is it most convenient for certain people? At its purest form, the academic calendar is the tool that drives our instructional program. And so when you think about it from that perspective as a policy decision, please keep that in mind, because sometimes when you open this up to a lot of different perspectives, the view that Dr. Marble and I will have is not the perspective that others will.
I have another follow-up question. May 23rd, Friday before Memorial Day, often was the double secret. If there's too many snow days, we've got it or don't have it. That is just from going forward proposed as just a no school day.
Because Dr. Marble has done the work to show that we have ample instructional minutes for all of our areas, except for the area of high school. High school is probably the tightest. If we have a miserable winter,
Middle school.
and middle school,
Yeah.
our secondaries, elementary, we could have 5 inclement weather days and be fine because that's how much they're teaching. But that we have challenges at the secondary level where I think both middle school and high school, they have the 2 to 3 days built in. So if we have a difficult winter with weather and we exceed the 2 to 3 days, that's where that May 23rd day may have to be utilized for secondary students. I think elementary school parents should feel comfortable that is a day off.
One of the other things I was curious about, Dr. Worley, this may speak to a couple of things I think you were curious about as well. I would love to hear at a future meeting what we're doing to transition students into middle school and high school. I know there's some things where some students sometimes will have days where they're going, maybe a middle schooler is coming back to their high school. But I would love to hear kind of systematically what we're doing across the system. We've got in summer school programs that are kind of like transition to kindergarten, transition to middle school. I don't think we have a transition to high school, but we've got historically some students have taken the summer school courses for credit before their first year. But I'd be curious to kind of hear outside of our calendar, what things that we're doing at the end of 5th grade and the end of 8th grade, opportunities that we might have over the summer to help students prepare for and be ready to go. And then I know we've got things that we're doing. I think there was just a freshman parent information night that I saw that kind of popped up that's upcoming for 8th grade families of new students into the high school. So I think that might be a really neat thing to kind of be able to really communicate systematically of here's some key markers of time where you're transitioning and here's where you can learn about some of these items. Because I know we're doing a lot, but I never see it anywhere in one spot at one time. Seeing no other comments or questions, we will then move into board governance. Do we want to take?
I have a question that at the secondary level, do you have a prediction to when the you might start to see a normal start time like we have in the past, the 8 a.m. start time as opposed to 7:50?
I don't foresee us being able to move back to an 8 o'clock start time in order to maintain the number of instructional minutes that we need to have in order to be in compliance with the Department of Public Instruction. So
Dr. Marble, when you compared, when considering that 8 o'clock start time that we used to have, how does that compare to other high schools in the metropolitan area in terms of a start time?
Yeah, so last year when we were going through the process of trying to figure out what direction do we go? And I just want to give a shout out to Mr. Gala and Mr. Hughes last year and the teams at the high schools, because this was a process and it was not done just like, let's just throw something in the dark. There were traffic patterns taken into consideration, safety measures. And when we look at other schools, 8 o'clock is one of the latest start times in the whole entire metro area. I would even venture to say in the state. Most schools start between 7:15, 7:30. Those are the typical start times for high schools. So 8 o'clock is actually very late, and even 7:50 is still considered relatively late.
And to clarify, Max, were you advocating for earlier start time?
The other thing we could do is, and we did examine this, is continuing to start at 8 o'clock, but then we would have to push back the release time to be, 3:30, 3:20, something about along that line. But then we're running into dismissal and traffic procedures with our middle schools and our elementary schools and high schools, students needing to get to athletic events, and they're already being dismissed very early from their academics in order to take advantage of that, or our high school students that need to be to work by 3:30. So there were a lot of things taken into consideration when we move forward with this start time.
In my recollection is over my time on the board, the board has also really pushed. I know the district has tried to make sure those start times are as late as possible, because all the data kind of indicates.
Yes, biological data is on your side.
Yeah, a 7:15 or a 7:30 start time is really early for a high school student who's trying to get to school. So I empathize with the challenge and with the desire to sleep later, particularly this time of year.
Well, and the data is really strong that the sleep patterns the reversing, not to say that we're going this direction, but reversing elementary school kids to be early and high school kids to start later is definitely where the biological data goes. So you might want to make that argument at some point.
Middle school probably should start about 2 p.m.
No, they sleep longer in high school or later.
Dr. Joseph Anger, so I appreciate this been a very robust conversation around the calendar and a lot of questions have been posed. Are there any questions that are pending that board members need to have addressed prior to the 27th? I know there's interest, that's good, but are there any looming questions that need to be addressed prior to the 27th?
How long did not this next year, but the second calendar that we're looking at in terms of, are we voting on both of them?
Yes.
So if we wanted to look at these other options in terms of preparation students for start to the school year or cultural diversity, we're really able to do that in 26, 27.
No, I wouldn't say. I would say for the 24-25 school year, I think what you heard from Dr. Marble is that what we need to do is to go back to our secondary principals and talk to our secondary principals and staff to develop a full day of activities for both freshmen and sixth graders. It sounds good here now for the people who are with those children all day to make it relevant and meaningful. That we want to make sure that they have buy-in as well, and that they understand the complexity of having those children all day for both on the freshman side of the house and also for sixth graders. I think for Ramadan, I've done an initial review, but I'll dig into it more. For the 24-25 school year, the highest holy day, it looks like that would happen over spring break for Ramadan 25. That would not be the case for Ramadan 26. And we kind of know what, I think it's the week of March 18th ish or so. So we would need to do some more research, but that doesn't prevent you from adopting the calendar. And if we have to come back and identify a day, we have the ability to do so. So that's why I'm posing the question of, are there any pressing questions? This has been very healthy and robust in terms of the interest and the points that have been identified. But are there any pressing questions that you need us to address prior to your vote on the 27th?
I'll swing around. Dr. Worley. Ms. Wills.
No.
Ms. Harmer-Holland.
No.
Dr. Hurd.
No.
Nothing for me.
So what we will do is we will follow up on the question around other high holy days from an inclusivity standpoint, because I think it is, again, I want to ground this work in our strategic plan. It's grounded in strategic plan number 2 of just being as diverse and inclusive as we can be. So we'll continue to do that work. And then also we will follow up with our high school principals to identify what type of model for conferences works best from their perspective. So that's work that we can do, but that shouldn't pause you from voting on the 27th. And then number 3, we'll follow up with our secondary principals on what does a full day of onboarding for 6th graders and 9th graders look like. Those are our 3 takeaways as I listen to this conversation.
Are we ready to move into board governance? Do we want to take 5 minutes? Or do you feel? We have many first readings of policies. Thank you both very much. And then a couple action items, 2 action items to rescind policies that are taken up by another policy. I don't necessarily know if the board needs to. We've had all the policies in front of us. If you want to give maybe a really high level overview of anything, or if start there, and then if the board has any specific questions on any policies. But I feel like we've had a really good, robust amount of time to kind of review and look at everything.
You mind if I?
No, you can. I mean, I have the sheet that you prepared was what I was
Yep.
going to speak from. So feel free to.
A lot of these policies under prior Neola updates, they were called administration, and now they're moving to calling this more superintendent. And they're calling this section superintendent. So a lot of these changes are regarding the one employee that the board does have, which is the superintendent. Dr. Worley is going to reference an overall sheet that I think the board may have been provided, where it gives you an overview of of all of these different policies and just kind of an overview of what each of them are addressing, and if there's any changes to those, the language of the policies. I would just share with the board and the public. I know that there's a lot of concern about the rescinding of policy 5514.02 and 5514.03. We're not rescinding the ability for the use of service animals or therapy dogs in schools. The ability to have service dogs and therapy dogs in our schools have been incorporated in another policy.
Right.
And so that 89.
That's the ADA compliant.
Yeah.
No.
I think it's under another policy.
Okay. Yeah. And I know that the reason we brought them forward is because they overlap.
Yes.
They're not necessary.
But they're not, we're not doing away with the ability to use those animals. And then under 5460, I think is very straightforward in regards to the increase in 1 credit. I think we're moving from 23 credits to 24. We're also moving up the grade point average necessary to be an honors graduate from, I think, a 3.2 to a 3.5. but is being increased to 3.5. And under policy 8913.01, Mr. Pinion and I had the privilege of working with our school attorney, Renee Aldana. You've met Renee. We met with her again earlier today. I think it's important to note that Renee Aldana drafted the language for policy 8913.01, and she aligned it directly with the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice. So I know that there are community members who are interested in this policy. I would just tell the community and the board that you should rest assured that the policy has been reviewed by legal counsel multiple times, and legal counsel aligned it directly to the guidance from the Department of Justice. And Ms. Aldana did that in the name of, if there's ever a challenge, that our ability to combat that challenge would be grounded in the fact that we aligned our policy language to DOJ direction.
And do we want to add that your sense in terms of the lay of the land from other school districts is that we're really setting the pace here for school districts. Is that fair?
Yes, ma'am. Typically, you will note that the level of accommodation is really in policies only referencing students and how the school system will address accommodations for students while they're in the classroom. It's rare for school systems to be thoughtful enough to identify how do you create accommodations for an aunt or an uncle or a family member who needs American Sign Language interpretation happening at a play, or a family member who needs to have large print at teacher-parent conferences. School districts, it is hard to believe, while we are places of being very inclusive and diverse, I don't think we're being as conscious and attentive to this issue. And so that's why we're really proud of the language that's in 8913.01. Mr. Pinion.
I wanted to add as well that this language also mirrors and is very aligned with what Independence First had handed over to us as well in their recommendation. The only difference was the order in which we put it to lead with more positive aspects. So not only is it aligned to the Department of Justice recommendations, but also Independence First.
Shall we jump in? So just a reminder that these are first reads. This is the most helpful to the policy committee. If you have recommendations for things that you would like to see differently, so we can bring it back to our next policy committee meeting on Monday, the 27th.
Yes.
So then hopefully we can move these forward. So 1100. I think it's going to be easiest for you if you're actually looking at board docs and just pulling those up as we go. It's updated from the 2009 version, but there are really no material changes suggested. Okay, they're going up on the screen now too. Good, thank you. So we're basically, as Dr. Means said, we're looking at striking and changing items that go with aligning them with Neola, and also aligning them with this perspective of who is the employee of the district. I don't think I need to read this one. Are there questions or comments, suggestions or recommendations that you'd like the policy committee to consider?
Do you think we need to go policy by policy, or can we just ask the questions that we have for the sake of expediency?
I think that I'll make a quick reading through, and if there's nothing, then we'll do what we just did now. We'll consider that one, move forward. Otherwise, we might be bouncing from one policy to the next. 1110, assessment of district goals. This one's updated from 2016, and it allows policy 1240, aligns policy 1240 to the district to the assessment of district goals to ensure that the board's loan emphasis, loan employee, sorry, I'm like trying to read off this Excel file. It's very, very long. Loan employees focus on the achievement of district goals. Aligns language to feature the superintendent as the employee and not as administration. And not administration as the employee. So superintendent, as we talked about earlier, is the employee that then works with the administrative employees. Questions or comments on this one?
I have a couple of questions on this.
Excellent, thank you.
In part C, it states that we evaluate, I can't find it now, individual board members. We don't do that. So why is that in the policy? And then why did the last two paragraphs, why were those taken out? Is strategic planning addressed in a different policy?
I believe it is. I think to see that the intention is that we're going to just basically state that as we're going through the process of evaluating the superintendent, it's also anytime you're the employer, it's also using that time to figure out whether systems are that might be contributing to anything that is either high achievement or a concern, kind of like we did with the district achievement tonight.
I think we do that for the board. I mean, we're always are looking at the effectiveness of us as a unit. I just wonder if we're going to say as well as each board member, then that's going to have to be something we talk about in the retreat, how we do that. So is that something that you think we're going to do and want to do? Or otherwise, I think we could strike board member part. I think keeping, yes, we need to make sure we're effective as a board. I don't know that we need to measure each individual board member.
The board in the past has done a board self-evaluation annually or near annually. And
it's in our bylaw.
Yep. What I can't remember is if you're really kind of talking about how we collectively work together. It's hard to parse out if it's an evaluation of individual members or the collective.
I think in the past you've done an evaluation, or at least in the one time that we've done an evaluation that was done this past February. There was an evaluation that the board did, and while they didn't call out individual names of a board member, there was an analysis of how the group worked with one another.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I don't want to.
And that could be covered by putting a period after the first time board appears. Is that what you're recommending?
I think if we have it in our policy, then we need to have a process that takes place
Agreed.
every time.
I agree with
We
you.
think it's important to measure board member effectiveness.
That's
Then
fair.
I think
That's
great, and if not, then I think strike it.
I think that's fair. In terms of the strategic planning piece, Liz, under policy 1400.01 that Dr. Worley is going to get to, there's the job description for the superintendent, and it references strategic improvement, and there's a whole section that talks about strategic planning and strategic improvement there.
Thank you.
Any other comments about or concerns? Are there people who would prefer to keep, before we do the work and take it out, would be prefer to keep the individual board member reference?
I would support striking.
We'll move on to 1210. This one identifies the superintendent as the chief executive officer of the district and empowers the superintendent to oversee the development of administrative guidelines, corrects the title of bylaw 0144.5, and includes language related to the board creating the optimum environment for supporting the superintendent.
I think we can move forward.
So 1220, no substantial changes to the language. But this is an opportunity for you to look at it and see if that's something you want. You'll notice that there is a fair amount struck, and that's because that's appearing elsewhere. And it also doesn't make sense to have, we had quite a decent discussion on this, to have the hiring in this particular policy, that fits better in HR policy than it does in outlining it here. And that this was actually quite different from having that language in there, made us quite different from typical descriptions across school districts. So we kind of took that into account as well. Any comments or questions or thoughts?
Is it standard to request or to have a physical examination of the superintendent? Just seems like
Apparently it
such a
is. We asked that too.
strange thing to ask. And it's so specific, a tuberculosis test, what?
Well, I think all
All teachers,
Yeah, if
yeah.
you're working in schools, you have to get that.
Which that maybe would be fine. It's just like such a strange thing to say, this is what your superintendent needs to
Right.
have.
And then I think it says something about genetic information.
Yeah.
I was wondering what that meant.
This is the model Neola policy.
Okay.
So strange.
I think it links to the statement to determine the physical capacity to perform assigned duties.
I mean, what is the physical capacity, I wonder, that we expect? I mean, seems more like it'd be important to know the cognitive capacity of your superintendent, not their physical capacity. I don't expect them to like lift students up.
So. Sorry, I couldn't get close enough to the microphone. According to statute, all employees are required to have a physical exam. All public school employees are required to have that. And up until a couple of years ago, a negative tuberculosis test was actually required. And now they've given us the great flexibility of a tuberculosis screening questionnaire. So that would be a requirement of any public school employee, not just the superintendent.
And that would be that 118.24 that's referenced
Thank you.
below. So if you notice at the very bottom, the list of 4 things, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. I mean,
Okay. And I think that actually has to do with benefits eligibility.
mhm.
We move to 12:30.
We added the term provide leadership to letter B and D. And this is an updated policy. The last time it was updated was 2009.
Something just super small on A, it just says preparing monthly board agendas. I would just make that more specific because we meet more than monthly.
Or maybe less, preparing board agendas.
Just,
Right.
yeah, so take the word monthly out.
Good catch.
All good otherwise.
12:30.
Yep.
Point one.
I'm going back and forth between documents and only one person tonight. 1230.01 assigns the development of administrative guidelines to the superintendent. So this is new.
And it's pretty straightforward. I think from a policy perspective, the board, it really coincides also with 1210 in terms of board superintendent responsibility. If the board's job is to develop policy, then you are then empowering the superintendent to develop the guidelines to implement said policies within the organization.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work in the last couple of years to make the difference between policy and guidelines or practice. Okay, anything else? I can go on. 1240. evaluation of the superintendent. This ensures that the evaluation of the superintendent is in conjunction with the assessment of district goals. The evaluation is expected to be conducted on an annual basis, grounded in feedback loop and self-evaluation of the board itself.
It stays away from specific dates like the current policy does. So I think it gives the board more flexibility. And I think that's the highlight of this rewrite.
$1241, non-reemployment of the superintendent. Reference that policy 3140 applies to administrators other than the superintendent.
So it's the same process that Ms. Zelazowski would utilize with any other administrator with a contract that's an administrator contract.
$1260, incapacity of the superintendent. This provides procedures for the board to replace the superintendent in case that person is unable to perform the duties of the position.
What I would just point out with this one is that I've been in Ms. Zelazowski's role and have seen this a few times. It can put a big drain on a district. So having this policy, while you hope to never use it, is necessary to have. It empowers the board president to enact and to put things in order right away. It creates a process in which there are medical records that are gained to expedite this process. So again, while you don't want to have to deal with this, it is something that comes up from time to time.
Some comments before we move on? So 1401 provides an updated version of the job description for the board's one employee. Note, we're thinking we aligned the language of 1401 to 1240 and to 1230.
It was very impressive that Neola had a job description that was very comprehensive. I'd see Ms. Zelazowski is giving her thumbs up, and it's a job description that I think is very comprehensive of the job. So.
Questions, comments, or changes? One of the great aspects of working with Neola that I'm learning is that they have so many other districts that they work with that we can draw on when something really good comes. We can bring it in, and we brought some policy forward already this year that they're looking at recommending to other districts too. So
look at that, Dr. Worley. That's a great segue into K. So 8913.01 is and I think the board deserves a lot of credit here, so I want to pause. A few months ago, you had a community member come to the microphone and state that there needed to be a process where accommodations are considered at board meetings. You directed me, and this is the way that the process between and what we identify in the policy 1210, the board superintendent relationship. You directed your one employee to figure out what to do around this. I worked with legal counsel. As we stated earlier, we also engage independent first. And as a result, this policy, which Neola doesn't currently have. So when they took our language and placed it in the Neola template, Dr. Zimmern did reference that Neola said, "Oh, this is pretty interesting, and this is good language. We'll consider this moving forward." I want to thank Renee Aldana again. As I cited earlier, this is in a straight alignment with the Department of Justice at the federal level. The only difference between what Independent First gave us and what the Department of Justice have is the order in which the complaint process is triggered. Otherwise, this is a very direct and straightforward legal document. And I want to thank you again as a board for responding to a community member's concern.
Comments or questions? I know, Dr. Muse, there was a little discussion in the policy committee meeting about Ms. Holland as the recipient of that. And I think we had a very useful discussion about reminding that, I mean, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion is well beyond trying to address cultural or racial inequalities, that this job that they have been hired for and have shown that they have the preparation for is about all aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the ADA process moving forward and getting more inclusive is definitely an example of that. And also, I think clearly the district was able to say that where and if there were times that additional information or training was needed, that would happen, but that the partnership with Independence First has been very fruitful thus far, and we continue to look forward to working with them.
I know Mr. Pinion's ready to weigh in on this one, so I'll let him do it.
I just wanted to add for the board that we are continually finding great opportunities to develop Shonda's skills as our Director of Diversity and Inclusion. She went to a national conference last year. She's been trained by our legal counsel in different types of investigations around this nature. So we will continue to provide those opportunities for her as we see the need arise.
We try to really keep away from using specific names, but rather titles in our policy so that we don't have to continue to shift policy every time, and remember to shift policy when somebody moves positions or isn't with us anymore. I see that we have an email, and so that would make it more challenging to make it more generic, but could you otherwise just say Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and then leave obviously the address and the phone number?
I can't say with certainty, but I believe this is similar to our Title IX policy where we have to actually call out. Now, this is unique, right, in terms of this policy being here, but in the spirit of that one, I would imagine it's similar. And we may have to just, if there's staffing changes down the road, ask the board to change it. But there are other policies similar where we must.
And that is accurate because we would, upon your pending approval, we would post this policy in every district building. So then if someone needs this policy, they would know who to contact. The other thing is that I would like us to get to a place where we can post our agendas, not inside the walkway of Fisher, but outside. And Ms. Summers and I are working on that right now because technically our agendas and a corresponding documentation should be accessible to the public where they don't have to walk inside our building. And so having this type of policy and knowing who to contact is really important.
Anything else? Okay, so 5460 graduation requirements, and I want to point out that this was both this and the some of the other ones that were brought, particularly this one was brought forward in this process that we're doing this year, where each area is looking at what they want to have changed. And so this was something that has had a strong recommendation from Dr. Marble's area. So if you wonder how this came and where the suggestions came from, it was really based upon the work that's been done to assess what's happening for graduation requirements, but also some of the curriculum changes being reflected here as well. So graduation requirement, and also looking at the data from other schools, districts around us. That's for that one, big nod. That moving from 23 to 24 credits, starting with the class of 2028, those would be current 8th graders. And that puts us more in alignment, makes us more competitive in that area. Again, with the change to the GPA for honors 3.5, right now it's 3.3, 3.5 is much more parallel to what other districts are doing and what sort of sensed as more of the norm. I also want to point out then, added to that some really important, the additional piece, expanding that a little bit, making it a little bit easier. Did you want to just, I mean, I could read it, but you could also say what.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to, so previously, as you can read there, the honors diploma was for students who earned a cumulative 3.33, and then also had completed one or more advanced placement courses. In the spirit of milestone 7, where we're looking at not only AP classes, but also dual enrollment opportunities, industry recognized certifications, and work-based learning experiences, really encompassing for students who earn a 3.5 GPA and take advantage of one of those different opportunities. So we're not pigeonholing just to students who see themselves as directly college bound, but students who see themselves as going into the trades, or students who see themselves going right into the workforce, that they too can earn an honors diploma for their work.
Comments or questions? Okay. And then, do you want to take these as a group? Well, I guess we're not doing it tonight. So the other two, which was brought up earlier, are a request to rescind, Dr. Means, did you look up the?
8390.
Okay, thank you. So
8390.
90 now covers this. And in addition, these were two policies that I believe were outside of alignment with Neola as well. So nothing is being lost in terms of use of service animals. If you would like us to, do we want to pull up the other one, or
Well, the issue that under 8390, the definition of service animal and therapy dog is clearly outlined in the policy. So the reason why we're suggesting the rescinding these two separate policies is because we folded into 8390 all the different issues that needed to be addressed with both service animals and therapy dogs. So nothing's being, to Dr. Worley's point, there's nothing being lost, no service is being taken away from schools or the ability of schools. I know at one of our elementary schools, one of our social workers does use a therapy dog, and that's in play right now. All of that would still remain in place.
What I would like to recommend for these two, because action is going to be taken this evening, is that.
would you like us to call up 8390?
I think, do folks feel comfortable with kind of, I think we're okay.
Okay.
But I have, Liz, do you have both open? If you can call out both, make motions for each
Separate motions.
in each one at a time. So just the first one, we'll ask if there's any board comment or questions on it, and then we'll vote, and then we'll go to the next.
It is recommended that the school board rescind policy 5514.02, student use of service animals.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hoig. Any board comment or question on this item? Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Hammer-Rolland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer? Dr. Jessup Banger?
Yes, and that motion passes. Please.
It is recommended that the school board rescind policy 5514.03, therapy dog in schools.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any board comments or questions on this one? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Morris? Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Hammer-Rolland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer? Dr. Jessup Banger?
Yes, and that motion passes. So 2 weeks, we will have a lot of second readings of policies. As with our normal pace and cadence, over that 2-week window. If anything additional does come from come up for any board member, please do let Dr. Worley and Mr. Morris know. But it sounds like tonight we had a pretty substantial conversation, and for the most part, minor changes in many of these, and a new policy that work's been done that folks have seen. So,
But we're not doing second reads till, because policy meeting is next to 27th. You want us, since there's very few changes, is everyone good with, do you want these brought back on the 27th?
I was gonna go as far, Dr. Worley, I don't know how you feel about this. You could even place this on your consent agenda.
That's what I was gonna ask, consent agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
Nice. Yeah. We have some others too, so you might want to get these out of the way. Thank you.
okay. Thank you very much for your ongoing work with the policy committee. We are at the end of the meeting. It is 8:17 p.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Morris, Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Tamara Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer, Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes, and we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.